Picture this. It's 1957, and you're sitting in your living room, maybe adjusting the rabbit ears on your television set, when suddenly Walter Cronkite interrupts your evening programming with news that would change everything. The Soviets, those mysterious folks behind the Iron Curtain, have just launched a metal sphere the size of a beach ball into orbit around our planet. Its name? Sputnik. And with that single beep, beep, beep echoing from space, the most expensive, dramatic, and oddly romantic competition in human history had officially begun. The space race wasn't just about rockets and mathematics, though there was plenty of both. It was about two superpowers essentially having the world's most elaborate argument about whose system was better, played out against the infinite darkness of space. On one side, you had the United States, land of the free, home of the brave, and apparently, home of the perpetually surprised when it came to Soviet achievements. On the other, the USSR, a nation that had mastered the art of secrecy so well that even their failures were classified. But let's rewind to the beginning, to those quiet moments before the storm. In the aftermath of World War II, both nations found themselves with a peculiar inheritance: German rocket scientists. The Americans got Wernher von Braun and his team, while the Soviets captured their own collection of German expertise. It was like the world's strangest draft pick, except instead of choosing athletes, they were selecting the minds that would eventually hurl human beings toward the moon. Sergei Korolev, the Soviet Union's chief designer, though his name remained a state secret until after his death, was working in relative obscurity, designing rockets in a nation still rebuilding from devastating war. Meanwhile, American engineers were grappling with their own challenges, often hampered by bureaucratic infighting and the peculiar American tendency to conduct rocket tests in full view of the press. There's something almost endearing about a nation that would televise its failures, though the exploding rockets on live television probably felt less charming to the engineers involved. The launch of Sputnik sent shockwaves through American society that rippled into the most mundane corners of daily life. Suddenly, parents found themselves staring up at the night sky with their children, pointing at a moving dot of light that represented everything their world wasn't prepared for. Teachers scrambled to explain orbital mechanics to students who had barely mastered long division. The phrase space age entered the lexicon, though most people had only the vaguest idea what that actually meant. What followed was a series of increasingly ambitious firsts that read like a cosmic game of one-upmanship. The Soviets sent the first animal into orbit, poor Laika, the stray dog from the streets of Moscow who became the most famous canine in history, though her return journey was never part of the plan. The Americans responded with their own menagerie of spacebound creatures, including monkeys with names like Abel and Baker, as if the cosmos had become a very expensive, very dangerous zoo. Then came Yuri Gagarin, a pilot who had grown up in a peasant family, whose father was a bricklayer and whose mother was a dairy farmer. On April 12, 1961, this son of rural Russia became the first human being to see Earth from space, to experience the profound silence and overwhelming beauty that would forever change how we understand our place in the universe. His flight lasted just 108 minutes, but those minutes redefined human possibility. The American response was characteristic in its boldness and its timing. President Kennedy, facing pressure from every direction, stood before Congress and declared that America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. It was the kind of promise that sounds magnificent in speech but must have terrified the engineers who would actually have to fulfill it. Imagine being handed an assignment to solve problems that didn't yet have solutions, using technologies that didn't yet exist, on a timeline that seemed designed by someone with a very optimistic relationship with reality. What's remarkable about the space race is how it transformed the daily lives of ordinary people. Children began dreaming of becoming astronauts instead of cowboys. Families gathered around television sets to watch rocket launches with the same intensity they'd once reserved for baseball games. The future, which had always been a vague concept, suddenly had a deadline and a destination. The Apollo program became America's answer to Soviet secrecy, a massive, public effort involving hundreds of thousands of people, all working toward that single, audacious goal. Engineers worked 16-hour days, calculating trajectories and testing materials that would need to survive the journey to another world. Seamstresses stitched spacesuits with the precision of surgeons, knowing that a single mistake could mean the difference between life and death in the vacuum of space. And then, on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, and suddenly, the impossible had become history. The grainy television footage reached living rooms across the globe, showing humanity's first footsteps on another world. Children stayed up past their bedtimes to witness history. Parents tried to explain to their families that they were watching something that would be remembered for centuries. The space race officially ended with that lunar landing, though both nations would continue their space programs long afterward. What began as a competition born from Cold War tensions had evolved into something more profound, a testament to human ingenuity, determination, and our irrepressible desire to explore the unknown. In those quiet moments after Armstrong's famous words echoed across Earth, perhaps the most remarkable realization was this: we had looked up at the moon our entire history, and finally, someone had looked back.